Coming up on episode 69 of the Behind the Back podcast, Jalen Hurts. Is he hurting the Eagles? There's a lot of drama surrounding this team. We will talk about that. San Francisco with a 5% chance to win the division. Will they be able to build on that this week and come away with a win against the Rams on Thursday night? The Chargers. You know what? The Chiefs might just be lucky, but they lost a tough one. Will they be able to bounce back against the Bucs with Herbert hurt? Then we do our betting picks of the week before discussing the Sacramento Kings. The Kings, man, Malik Monk, they're feeling the effect of him in the starting lineup. We also talk about some potential trade options and what these next 10 games means for the rest of the season. With that being said, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conan Negron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet Rets. Ben, how you doing, my brother?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Doing good. Another good week, but we got some stuff we have to address first. As you guys heard in the intro, we got a lot of fun topics to talk about, and we're switching it up. These past few weeks, we've been talking Kings first, starting that way and then going into football. But given the nonsense that we've been hearing early this week surrounding the Philadelphia Eagles, we thought it was important to start with that first, now that everything's kind of been cleared up since all this nonsense we heard on Monday. So I wanted to start off by just doing a quick little rundown. Started with the Eagles. It comes off of a win. And off of that win against the Carolina Panthers, we could have been talking about how Saquon broke the all-time rushing record for the Philadelphia Eagles. We could have led into that with some of the moments of the game. But no, I had to scrap that because A.J. Brown wanted to say something about our passing, specifically. One word. Listen, for anyone who watched that game, the Eagles' passing was horrendous. It wasn't good, but they still won the game. They eked it out. They got lucky, and Xavier got drop away from things sounding a little different. And you and I are going to go back and forth on why some of this discourse matters. But we want to talk about the stuff that doesn't matter, and that was the stuff that everyone was talking about the first Monday and Tuesday, which everyone likes to do when they don't have all the information. They love to speculate. They love to just get all this out of the way. So it started with in the post game. And they were in the locker room, in the Philly locker room. Everyone was a little bit upset because nobody really liked how that game ended outside of, okay, we got to win. But they asked AJ, they're like, oh, what do you think needs to improve from this game? And he just said passing. That's it. And they asked him about, he had thrown his helmet on the sideline. They asked him about that. And they said, what, caused that? And he said a 3-and-out. And that was the answer. It was very short-sighted. And then when they asked Jalen in the press conference, he was very kind of short. He didn't really want to answer a few of these questions. So that led into that. People were like, okay, the passing offense is an issue. And then unprompted on his radio show with WIP, which is the Philly sports radio, Brandon Graham has his own show, the Brandon Graham Show, hosted at this local bar. And I did listen to this interview in full because I wanted a little more context. And it was one of the first questions that they asked him. And normally in this situation, you would get like, oh, hey, like, for Brandon Graham, he's very an open book. So you can kind of, if you lead him with the right question, he'll say something. But they just asked him about the game. And then the first thing he said was, oh, AJ and Jalen aren't getting along. Things are bad. Like, their friendship isn't the same. One is trying, but 11 is, the way he's responding isn't right. Like, we need to get this fixed. And I was like, and out of nowhere, I was like, okay, wait, what's happening here? And that's what caused everyone to freak out because everyone was already talking about the pass game. And then it turns into, wait, our two best, our two closest players are no longer friends, is what he's saying? Like, why? What's this huge deal? So it was the talk of the town for the past 2 days. And then it got cleared up today after, press conferences in the locker room today with AJ, with Jalen. Sirianni tried to put out the fire yesterday, and Brandon Graham walked back his comments saying he didn't know the full story. And AJ and Jalen spoke. They asked them both about Brandon, and Jalen said, and I'm quoting Tim McManus from ESPN here. He said, Jalen just spoke with Brandon Graham. He clarified his comments about Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown's relationship. I just assumed about their friendship, and it made me out to look even worse because I had it all wrong, and now people are going to run with it. Correct. So that's what happened. They ran with it. And then we got AJ's comments. So this was today. It was a couple hours ago in the locker room. He says, me and Jalen are good. Everybody loves BG. He's speaking from the heart. He's giving his perception from the outside. I think that's they perceive what I said about the passing and think it's an attack on Jalen. I think that's what Graham did. Me and Hurts are good. Our relationship is good. And then Jalen says, we're good. We've spoken. In the end, BG knows he spoke out of place. It's about the team in the end. I think overall, that's where my focus is. I think that's where everyone's focus is at heart. Whenever something happens, I look at myself first. And then Jalen said, there are moments where I can definitely get the ball out quicker. That's something I own. In terms of my role in it, I'll figure it out. Jalen Hurts also said, no one cares how you get it done, when you get it done. That's it. I feel like everything I say stems from the winning versus the standard question you had. You have standards at the end of the day, but when did winning not become the main thing? So this was, again, all in regards to AJ Brown voicing his concern about the Eagles passing offense. So I wanted to offer your early takes on this. What do you think about all this that happened?
It was pure comedy. There's a couple sides of the coin. So I'll start with one coin and then I'll move over to the other one. The first side is, from Brandon Graham's perspective, if you don't know the full story, don't talk about it.
Right.
Keep your mouth shut. Like at that point, you're airing out laundry that isn't necessarily dirty, but you're making it sound dirty. And it just created this whole thing with the winning team that now they have to address. It should be water under the bridge. So that's the one side. The other side of it is it was so poorly handled from the first comments of it, just with all the media just taking off with it. And Brandon Graham's like, he makes that comment of, everybody just ran with it. Well, of course they did. They're going to. It's the media. You say one little thing and everyone's going to talk about it because it's their job.
Yep.
So, it's a learning lesson for him, and maybe he'll learn something from it. I don't know that he's ever learned anything, with using his mouth before. But yeah, it was interesting to see this kind of unfold. But it did, on the other side, looking at the other coin now, it did raise some questions and kind of did force people to look at this Eagles offense and specifically look at the passing game. And there are some alarming tendencies that have been going on throughout this season with Jalen Hurts. And there's positives. He hasn't been turning over the ball. He's been really safe with the ball. But on the other side of things, will that get you a playoff win? And that's what we need to talk about here, because my perspective to kick off this conversation, you need a great quarterback to make great plays in a playoff game, no matter the physicality level. When you get into a playoff scenario, you can pound the ball 100 times, but in the end, you're going to need a quarterback to go down the field and make plays. And if your quarterback is afraid to throw the ball over 25 or 30 yards because he feels like he's forcing it into something where it might turn into an interception, like 15 interceptions, you're not going to win that ball game. And that's something that I'm worried about with the Eagles. Now, your take.
So there's a couple ways to look at it. I agree with when you look at all the numbers, where the Eagles stand right now as a passing offense, their efficiency, DVOA, EPA, all that advanced nonsense that people like to look over. As it stands, when you look at the teams that have made it to the conference championship and the Super Bowl over the past 20 years, your passing offense needs to be in the top quartile, meaning a top 8 offense in terms of efficiency in the past. And the Eagles are like 18th. So they're in a really not that great spot. But I think this is, when you watch the film, a lot of this was on Jalen. A lot of this was Jalen holding the ball way too long, not you can clearly see then people were running the route, the all 22 all week, open routes of Jalen and or of AJ and Devontae just wide open right away, and Jalen just not ripping it even though he has a clean pocket. And I part of this could be Jalen's not turning the ball over right. I wonder how much of it was the coaching staff during the bye week saying, listen, we will take these negative plays, take a sack here. If you're not comfortable, don't throw it. I don't know if they're preaching that to him. But when you look at, this is a results driven league. And I think in the regular season, specifically, especially with the way we're trying to finish this thing out, if you have a formula that's working, that's helped you win 9 straight games, that's also had consistent games from Jalen in this 9-game stretch. It's not like this whole 9-game stretch, he's just been throwing for 100 yards. That's not the case. He had a big game against Cincinnati. He had a big game against, I'm trying to remember all the teams we've played, but he's had big games where yes, the numbers wouldn't suggest that he's lighting up the league. He's not throwing for 300 yards a game. He's only done that once this year. But when you're running the ball as effectively as we are, there's no need to go away from something that is clearly working in a way that people say, oh, running teams can't really impose their will consistently. But what we're seeing with the Eagles is an efficiency level that's just never been done in recent memory, outside of like teams like the 49ers and things like that. You watch that, and then you have the Eagles defense, who is playing at a level that nobody anticipated them to be playing this year. They're playing like a top 5 defense, and this team wins ugly. And we've also been in situations, people want to complain about the first quarter offense, but then the people, oh, they're only scoring 17 total first quarter points this season. But then in those same games, we're blowing out LA 37-20. We're beating the Baltimore Ravens after being behind. We're beating the Commanders after being behind. I just think that when you run into like what the Eagles can do, I think people are so hyper focused on what they're currently doing right now that they think that this version that they just saw on Sunday, or the past couple of weeks where his numbers have been low, are what this Eagles team is, and that there's no room for improvement or that they can't get any better. They have AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. Jalen Hurts has shown he can be a consistent passer. He's just not throwing it deep. And we saw this trend when they were 2-2, weeks 1 through 4. He had 30 plus attempts in each of those games. He was slinging the ball down the field, but he was turning the ball over a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And these past 2 weeks, he's only had 1 attempt of 20 plus yards, which is not what you anticipate when you have AJ Brown and Devontae Smith lurking at any possible juncture. So I do think part of this is on Jalen. He needs to be less afraid to just. I think it's weird because people don't want him to turn the ball over. So then when he doesn't do that, they're like, well, you're not throwing it enough. And so then so now the question is, are us as fans going to be okay if Jalen slings it for 30 times a game, but then it's back to the old ways of, yeah, he'll get 3 touchdowns, 250 plus yards, but then there's 2 interceptions in there that were costly or things like that, because he's, trying to find this happy medium, I think, is something the Eagles can do and still have time to do, because they've won 9 straight and put themselves in a position, especially when you get to go up against the Giants and the Cowboys one more time, where you can figure this out and really get that comfortability prior to getting into the playoffs. That's how I feel about it.
My only concern with that is, when you get to the playoffs, the game entirely changes. Your game plan going into each game in the playoffs, it's different than what it is in the regular season. And for me, I looked at last year's playoffs, a lot this week, and I did a lot of diving into like QB stats and what running games look like versus what the quarterback games look like. Only one team last year won when their QB recorded under 200 yards of passing, and that was Lamar and the Ravens. But he also had 100 yards on the ground versus the Texans. So then I look at Jalen this season. He's got 7 games under 202 yards or less. And that, you're not going to win a playoff game with like 200 yards of offense through the air. I mean, it's not sustainable in my opinion, because when you look at Saquon and what he's brought to the offense this year, he's been doing it all year long. Is that sustainable in a playoff game where you've been stacking weeks, especially if you don't get the 1 seed? and you don't get that bye week, you've got to go into the first round of playoffs, then you go second and third, and then Super Bowl. Like, is that sustainable? And that's where I'm worried, because at that point, if he does get banged up, or if he does get tired and you have to rely on Jalen and his arm, he doesn't have the reps since week 1 and 2 that to throw the ball over 30 times. He hasn't seen that kind of reps. So then when it's asked of him to make a shot, to take a shot, to lead a game-winning drive, would he be able to do that is where I'm concerned.
My counter to that, I would argue, let's take a look at and I get it, two different teams. The 2022 Super Bowl Eagles that went to the Super Bowl. They made it to the Super Bowl off of Jalen averaging 192 yards throughout the entire postseason. Because what were they doing? They got a big lead early, and then they just ran the ball because they didn't have to throw it. And their defense was awesome, and their defense kept other teams from scoring. And yes, they played the Daniel Jones-led Giants that also had Saquon there. And they played the Niners, and obviously that was a fluky game. That was, you're not playing they didn't need to throw in that game either because of the injury. But then when you get to the Super Bowl, the biggest game of the year, he plays arguably the best game of his entire career as a passer there. I think that when you have the talent on this roster, I understand that it's not happening now, but that also doesn't mean that he's not capable. I believe that Jalen is capable of carrying this team when it matters the most. And when we saw, yes, the Panthers game was ugly, but he was responsible for every single touchdown in that game. He converted in the red zone. He hit those throws. When the Eagles were very close to selling that game offensively, they had a 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 15, and he converted that to AJ Brown. Like, it was, I think people are overreacting to the numbers, and yes, maybe the Eagles are leaning into the run game a little bit too much, but I don't even think that's the case either, because they're also 7-1 when Saquon carries the ball 20 plus times. And it would have been 8-0 had Saquon not dropped the ball against the Falcons. So it's one of those things where there needs to be, I agree that his play needs to be better for this team to reach the Super Bowl, and that we can't play a game like we did in Carolina against the Detroit Lions and expect to win that game. I completely agree with that. I agree 100%. He's holding the ball too long. He needs to get the ball out quicker and take what the defense gives him. They're giving him these short stuff. They're giving him these bunnies to AJ and Devontae. Feed them. I get that. So I just don't buy that this team can't throw the ball. That's the part where I think the whole narrative around this team is, oh my gosh, like, they can't pass the ball. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think Jalen has shown throughout the course of his career that he is capable of adjusting and making plays when they matter most. He's not 45-19 because his defense was there the whole time to carry him. So I just think that he has a track record of winning ugly. He has a track record of dominating people. He has a track record of adjusting from being a run-first QB to a pass-first Super Bowl leading QB, and he regressed a little. And I think that there's a learning lesson for him that hopefully the offense, like Sirianni and Kellen Moore, need to find a way to find that happy balance with him where, hey, don't be afraid to sling it if you think you have the opportunity, because AJ, if you're going to chuck it up on a 50-50 ball, he's winning that 70% of the time, which is unlike any other receiver in the league. So I get that. And that play has been missing over this course of the past at least 3 games. And I think that is a cause for concern. But I just think that the Eagles coaching staff has recognized, okay, these are issues, and they know how to adjust. We're seeing this team kind of go through the ebbs and flows of this season of having to make adjustments on the fly. The bye week, things weren't working out. What they do? They leaned on the run. Now they peeled off 9 straight, and their defense has been incredible. And now the passing offense needs to catch up. And I think that they can. And I also think that they will. And I don't think Jalen is not confident. I think we could chalk that up to a bad game. In my opinion, I think that Jalen will be able to bounce back. Now, do I expect that this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers? Do I want him to sling it 30 times? I don't. I don't want him to do that.
Why not?
I don't want them to change the recipe that's been working against a legitimate. This is the best defense you're going to see the rest of the way. So when we talk about Pittsburgh, they're an awesome team. They do exactly the same thing you do. Russ threw for 150 yards last week, and no one's talking about how bad the Pittsburgh passing offense is. Like, you want to, and it's not like this season.
They also don't have AJ Brown and Devontae
They
Smith.
also don't, yeah. But but it's not like their crew's that bad. Mike Williams has been good for them. Calvin Austin's good for them. Pat Fryermuth is still there. Like they're not. They have good team. They have a good team.
Mm-hmm.
They win in such a similar fashion than the Eagles do, and I think that when it comes down to the playoffs, if you can control time of possession, if you are a dominant defense, you are going to be able to get there. Like, we've beaten the Packers, we've beaten so we've beaten the Rams, we've beaten the Commanders, we've beaten the Ravens, we've beaten good playoff caliber teams with high powered offenses. And what do they have that we don't? They don't. What do we have that they don't? We have a top 5 defense to match. And listen, our passing offense is terrible, yet we're still a top 10 scoring offense in the league. So it's not like we're not putting up points either. So I think that's the thing too, that, like, yeah, we could probably be dropping 40 points if this offense was what its ceiling could be. And I just think that it's still there. I think that offense still exists. I don't think it's gone. And I just think over these next few weeks, all it's going to take is just one game where Jalen throws 250 yards and 2 touchdowns, and him and AJ are hugging in the end zone, and everyone's going to shut up about it. I just think that is the passing offense broken? I don't think so. Could they be slightly more creative every now and again? Sure. Could they utilize play action more? Sure. Like, I think there are, again, more easy buttons that this team it never feels like they like to press the easy buttons. But I think that with Saquon being the way he is, no one's complaining about Saquon being the way it is. Nobody's talking about the passing offense in the way that we are addressing it this week. If AJ doesn't complain about it, if AJ doesn't say a word about it, people will be like, oh yeah, this was kind of a game from the offense. But if no one's complaining about it, no one says anything, then we can chalk it up to, like, okay, let's see how much longer this continues. I just think it's overblown because of the comments that were made, and now we're here, and I'm here having to defend this team who is a Super Bowl caliber team and is capable of going the distance how they are now. And I'm more confident in that. Like, listen, if I have to, Saquon's going to pull off 120 against all these teams who are like, oh, the Ravens have the number 1 rush defense, and Saquon crapped all over them. And that's why I'm very curious to see what happens against Pittsburgh, how we approach this game. Because if the Eagles not change their whole philosophy, but if they cater to AJ in this game, go out of their way to target AJ, and the Pittsburgh Steelers know all of this is happening around them, and they're aware that AJ Brown's going to get a little more love this weekend. It's going to be very interesting to see how both of these teams approach these game plans. Like, do the Eagles stick to their guns, stick with Saquon, and let this team ground and pound the Steelers, who are also going to try and control time of possession? It's just, for me, like, it would be foolish to just start feeding AJ when it doesn't make sense, forcing it to him. If he's open, which he usually is, go ahead and give it to him if it's there. And it's just a matter of Jalen feeling comfortable enough to let it rip, and I think he will. I'm confident that Jalen can adjust. I think everyone still, nobody really believes in Jalen. I'm the pure Jalen defender. I always give him a little more love, but I mean, when he wins as much as he does, it's hard to kill him for games where he doesn't come out.
That's what's frustrating for me, is because nobody gave Brock credit when the Niners were winning, even though he was slinging it. So why should I give Jalen credit for all the wins that they have with Saquon running the football as many times as he is? Like, that's where I'm at. Because real quick, nobody gives Purdy credit for having 4 receivers go over 1,000 yards last season. Nobody wants to talk about that. But nobody wants to talk about either all year long the fact that Jalen's been throwing to 2 of what should be the top 10 receivers in the league, a tight end who's more than capable of going over 1,000, he's proved it before, and a running back who can absolutely be utilized in the passing game. And yet the Eagles are finding themselves leaning on the run game for 13 straight weeks. Like, that to me is alarming in a quarterback, because it's like, that means that as an organization, it looks like, it doesn't mean it is, but it looks like you don't trust your quarterback to make a play when it matters. And that's the part that's like, it's hard for me to get around that.
But see, the part is, when it matters is the part that is I disagree with, because again, Jalen makes the plays when it matters. He has made multiple plays when it matters. When it's a crucial third down, he is able to either escape the pocket or make a tough throw. So I disagree. I understand the numbers don't back up my defense of Jalen, and his numbers statistically aren't as good as he has, like, even in his Super Bowl season. But like, I'm not sitting here pretending like he's the best passer ever. Like he was, like,
Right.
he can throw 50 times and I'm confident in that. No, I understand where his strengths are. And I don't think it's wrong for a team to lean into their strengths. Is that a knock
Agreed.
on Jalen? Probably. Like, I get that. Like, the Packers are doing the same thing to Jordan Love. No one's really talking about that either. Jordan
No,
Love's only throwing 20 times a game too. So it's like, when you're a turnover
all that.
machine, and the Bills are doing the same thing with Josh Allen. Like last year, what happened when they were losing a ton? They were throwing the ball. Josh Allen was a superhero every play. And then when they got their new OC, they're like, oh, let's just give James Cook the ball 15 times a game, and maybe that'll help him out a little bit. So it's like, I don't think it's such an indictment on Jalen when he's executing in those limited spots. Now, does that affect the passing offense as a whole? Yes, it is. It's showing that. And the issue I take with the response by AJ and a little bit Devontae, but Devontae is more professional in how he voices it. But like, listen, dude, like, I get your targets are low, but you're paid. Like, your focus should be on the Super Bowl. And AJ came out and said, like, oh, our focus is the Lombardi. And if that was really the case for a guy, AJ Brown, you're not saying crap. Like, there was literally an NFL Films thing for the Panthers game that showed Saquon when he fell at the one when he thought it was a touchdown. He's like, oh no, that's a touchdown, that's a touchdown. And then they did the tush push, and then Jalen's like, oh, I'm sorry, brother. He's like, no, I'm good. I'm trying to win. I don't care. Like, it's one of those things where AJ needs to just take a sample out of that playbook and just shut your mouth. Like, I get it, you're upset, but don't do that. And like, I get that you're trying to hold people accountable. You don't need the media to do that for you. But at the same time, all this attention is what makes this team different, and why I believe in them more is because last year we couldn't back it up. We couldn't back up our talk like, oh, we're going to be fine. But our defense was garbage. We were choking away games because we couldn't stop anybody. And that's not the case this year. We have the ground game and the defense to back up our talk. The only thing that could really screw us over if everything's going well is potentially Jake Elliott, but that's a different conversation. But that's where we're at right now. And I think where we are, like, we can win. We can beat anybody as we are. I don't think, like, if we were talking about the Eagles as they were streaking along, we've won 9 straight games. The Lions are the only team that have won more games than us at this like, streaking wise. And I just think that, like, people want to say, oh, but the Lions find a way to pass effectively and run the ball well, but their defense is trash because of all the injuries. I'm not saying that, like, they weren't that great before, but they're in a spot now where they have to be in shootouts. The Eagles don't have to be in shootouts to win games. If you're not putting up 25 plus, 24 plus on the Eagles, there's a good chance you're not winning this game because this defense holds teams to under 20 points. So I think that I understand that it is a concern, but I also think we're still I say this weirdly because we're 14 weeks into the season. I'm not saying it's still too early to jump on this, oh, this offense is broken, when they've provided you evidence all throughout the season where they have shown that they can do it. So I just don't think that I think it's too soon to just write off this passing offense when the talent is there. Jalen can do it. He has shown that he can do it. And I just think it's a load of crap. So I understand where people are coming from, and I just hope that they back it up. And it's hard because, like, now this week gets hyper focused because if the Eagles lose, it's going to be like, oh, did they pass the ball enough, or like, did they lean too much on Saquon? With Jalen Hurts, is he going to handicap him? Like, all that's going to be there because of what Brandon Graham said, to pour gasoline on this fire that was supposed to be kept in the locker room. So when I think about Pittsburgh and this matchup, these are teams that play very similarly. They're going to ground and pound, try to control time of possession, and let their quarterbacks, beat you by taking what they give you. Russ is the ultimate expert of taking what the defense gives him. Some fun little nuggets for this game. One of 2 records or streaks is going to be broken in this game. The Pittsburgh Steelers have not won in Philadelphia since 1965. They've lost their last 10 games in Philly. But on the other side of it, the Eagles have never beaten Russell Wilson. They're 0-6 against Russell Wilson in their career.
Oh,
So one of these two is getting tested this weekend. So it's going to be very interesting. So Danger Russ is back, and he's, getting MVP consideration, even though he hasn't really played that. I don't get it, but either way. And so again, the big story is going to be the Eagles offense versus this defense. You're playing a consensus top 5 defense with an amazing front who is healthy now that they got Alex Highsmith back in the picture. So you're dealing with TJ Watt, Cameron Hayward, and Alex Highsmith, Patrick Queen, like Joey Porter in the back end with Minkah Fitzpatrick. Like, you got a defense that you're going up against now. And it's going to be very interesting because they're not that they're good against the run, but they're not great. They're like they're top 10, but they're not like top 2, top 3. But even then, this would just be the game if I'm Nick Sirianni to just shove it down their throats and still just run the ball. Like, I don't want us to go away from what's working. Unless it has to, like, if the run's not working, then go ahead and try and beat them through the air. But I just don't think that this is the week that we just need to force it through the air.
well, and that was going to be kind of my question is if, if it fixes things, would you take the compromise and throw the ball to AJ, get him over 10 targets, which he hasn't seen since week 1, and, make him happy, but you get a loss? Or do you stick to your guns and you further prove the point that, like, AJ can streak downfield all game long, but Jalen may not be able to take that shot, whether it's his own decision, organizational decision, whatever the case, and you continue to pound the rock. So it's interesting to kind of hear how you broke all that down. Personally, if I was in your shoes, I would feel the way you do. I wouldn't want my team to get away from what's been working. You have 9 straight wins. Why would you change up? And anybody who's hating on from the outside, well, you can't even get in the club. Like,
we're 11-2, dog. Like, I don't know what we're talking about.
It's a winning formula. But my standpoint is I saw a running back come into an organization last year, go ham for a year, and then not pretty much play the entire next season because he was overutilized the entire season before. And that's something for me that I'm watching with this Eagles teams, because our teams are very similar. We have we follow each other in some ways and flip things. Like, we have similar seasons, and I see how much Saquon's utilized and how much he's leaned on. And I've texted you in the middle of games, low-key taking a dig at you and been like, where would you guys be without Saquon Barkley? Because that's the honest truth.
Yep.
Like, if you guys hadn't have figured out Saquon Barkley in week 3 and 4 or whenever it started, this team would be in a very different spot. I don't know where it would be, but it would be in a very different spot. And those are the tough conversations that fortunately we don't get to have, right?
Right.
So I like what the Eagles are doing, but the longevity of this system, of what they're doing, is where my concern comes in. But this week, I don't think you get away from it. I think to get a win against this Pittsburgh team, you got to pound the rock and you got to prove that, are you a top 10 run defense, or are you going to sit down against the best running back in the league in Saquon Barkley and just get him further towards that record?
Yeah, and I think, again, with the whole Saquon usage, I think, given everything that's happened to CMC, I agree with you that, listen, this could be the year. And that's what makes this argument for me even more prevalent. Like, stay with the hot hand. If we signed Saquon for 3 years, we didn't know we were going to get even a season remotely close to this coming into this. This was not the expectation. We were expecting him to do well, but holy crap, like, what he's doing now, that could not have been planned any better. So next year, it's probably not going to be the same Saquon, and then we're going to have to rely on our passing offense a little bit more to get the job done, in which it's up to the Eagles schematically to figure things out. And listen, these next few weeks are going to, this 9-game win streak has shown his worth, but these next couple weeks are going to show Nick Sirianni's worth to the organization, in the sense of how he has consistently handled drama around the team inside while trying to win games at the same time, and they have been able to manage that this whole season with all this drama that's come from the offseason, from him almost getting fired after a win against Cleveland to now being here where it's now drama between his two most well-known offensive players. So it's one of those things that this is why I believe in this team and Nick Sirianni. Last week felt like the most 2023 win of this season, but that's felt also been in that vein. It's been the only win that's felt that way. The rest of the year, it's felt like 2022 vibes. It's felt different. So I just think that it's really easy with the collapse being just a year ago to hang on that like, oh, the collapse is definitely going to happen again. But everyone's aware of that. They're a year removed from that, and it's not like the Niners situation where they're coming off of the Super Bowl. The collapse was their Super Bowl hangover. Like that was the issue, and now they're a year removed from that. Leader, Jalen, AJ, these guys have been through it. And listen, I don't even think if they lose this week, it's the end of the world. I just think that that's the thing. Like everyone is trying to make it that way. So even if they lose this week, then the spotlight's going to be on Oz. Their season collapsing, even though they play 3 relatively not as tough opponents to finish the season. So then it's like we're still talking about a 14-3 team as if they're fraudulent, and I don't think that's the case because they've provided multiple wins this year against teams that are contenders. So I don't know. It's just like where I sit. If I give a prediction for this game, they're 5-point favorites, which is a very interesting line. That means despite all this drama, Vegas, believes in them still, and I still believe in the overall talent of this team, and I believe in our defense. And I think that when we talk about this game in particular, injury-wise, Jalen does have a little, I guess his left ring finger is wrapped up. I guess he hurt it last game against the Panthers, so that's something to monitor, but he was a full go at practice, so that he's good. Slay's good to go. Reed Blankenship is back. CJ Gardner-Johnson, was a little worrisome, but he was practicing. So everyone should be good to go on the defensive side of the ball, so that's a good thing. And then on the Steelers, they don't have George Pickens. Has that affected their offense? No, they've dropped 27 plus in the past 2 weeks. So it's, they haven't really needed him. So it'll be interesting to see. This is against a good team, super well coached with Mike Tomlin. These guys know how to win games, and this is going to be ugly. If it's a Pittsburgh game, it's an ugly game. This is not going to be a game that is going to be. If the Eagles blow this team out, that would be a message. But a win is all that matters, given how this team has played this year. And I'm going to buy into the 5 spread. I think the Eagles, it's going to be ugly. This defense is really good. So I'm going to say it's going to be Eagles 24-17. I'm going to buy that. I think they'll get like a touchdown at the end, and then Pittsburgh won't be able to come back.
So I have 24-21 Eagles. I think that 3 points feels about right for how this Steelers season has gone. It's Mike Tomlin. He's going to keep every game competitive unless something goes drastically wrong for his team. And that's just kind of been the nature of Tomlin as a coach in this league. He's smart, man. He's really good. And that's a coach you don't mess around with and a team that you don't mess around with at any point. So I think, as the Eagles, you got to stick to your guns. You got to feed the hot hand, like you just said. And you got to make a statement early, if you want to run away with this one and not really have it feel close. Otherwise, you keep them in the ball game, like what happened with Carolina last week, and things could get more interesting than what happened with the Panthers for sure. So
absolutely.
24-21.
Yeah. So, again, a couple streaks to watch. It'll be interesting to see if the Eagles can finally beat Russ. That'll be very interesting. I knew we struggled against them. I didn't know we were 0-6. So, I hope that, we can control Russ in this, in their offense and really just, make a statement of some sort. And a statement's a win. And that's all I ask for at this point. Thank you for having this extended conversation with me about this, because this was interesting, because this is going to be the topic of conversation until the season ends. Even in the playoffs, it's going to be like, well, the passing offense choke, and this is the world I'm going to be living in, having to defend this team for the next 2 months now. So we'll see.
No, and I get it. I mean, I came on this podcast and even off the podcast talking to people, I would defend Brock like he was my own son, brother, father, whatever the case. Because I had full faith in him, like you have with Jalen. And, people said they saw red flags with Brock, and I'm like, these red flags are not, it's not a quarterback thing. This isn't his issue. And things started coming to light. He took control of that offense. He was trusted with the football to some extent. And, he was able to make plays, but nobody wanted to give him credit. And I see a similar situation with Jalen, upon the horizon, where Jalen could pop off and go for another 350-yard game or something crazy and have 4 touchdowns through the air, 2 of them to AJ. Like,
yeah.
And in the end, it's going to matter inside the locker room, but nobody gives a crap on the outside because, well, we've seen so many weeks in a row of Jalen being a mid quarterback. And I mean, this is my take. Unfortunately, I do kind of look at him as kind of a mid quarterback. I think he can finish games well, but throughout the entirety of a game, I don't see like that. He, to me, is what holds that offense back from just exploding game in and game out. Because if you have a quarterback that sees everything 100% of the time, even let's not say 100%, even 15% more of the time, you're hitting AJ on those deep balls. You're hitting Devontae on the out routes. You're finding these plays, and you're not having to lean on Saquon 30 plus runs. So it's interesting, but ultimately the job's getting done. This is going to be a gritty game. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, and what's even more interesting is who the broadcaster is going to be this weekend. Of course, they stationed the one and only Tom Brady on the call on this one. So this is going to be
I hate Tom as a commentator. I'm going to be honest with you. I hate it so much.
The amount of time he says that was an average throw. I'm like, this is great. I can't wait to hear that. It's going to be like, there's going to be every play. And that's the other thing with Jalen. Last thing is, like, when they're not throwing the ball as often as they are, when there's less to go off of, every play's under a microscope. So it's going to be, missed him this time, missed him this time, missed him this time. Oh man. So it's going to be, I can't wait to hear that. I might have to mute the call just to focus on the game. All right. So let's press on to the Niners, who had a vintage Niners game, dude. They dominated the Bears 38-10. And by the way, both of us have a post game out on our feed. Please feel free to go check those out. We were both very happy with the wins, despite the drama surrounding our teams. But Ben, coming off of a great win, you guys got a tough 4-game stretch. Mathematically, you are still in this thing. So what news have you been hearing around Niners camp before we talk about this game tomorrow?
Well, going into last week's game against the Bears, obviously they got the job done, right? But Purdy and Deommodore Lenoir, went and spoke to the team prior to the game. And those are 2 guys that, obviously Purdy's vocal, but Deommodore Lenoir is not typically a vocal guy. And Deebo kind of spoke on it and said, Demo kind of just, he lets the tape speak for himself, and he doesn't necessarily speak up. So for Purdy and Lenoir to speak up the way they did, it was something that this team really rallied behind. And I think, we talked about all year long how we see kind of a leadership, issue with the Niners. And I talked about how I needed there to be a leader going into the season to pull them out of whatever slump that they could potentially fall into. Well, we didn't have that. But, here we are with a 5% chance now to win your freaking division. And you finally have somebody stepping up and rallying behind it. So it's frustrating from that regard, but it's also promising because the rumors and everything you're seeing is they're going to pay Brock, which I'm fine with. I like it. I think Brock is a good quarterback. He's a better quarterback than we've seen under Kyle Shanahan yet. So I'm cool with it. And if he's going to step up and be the leader that has been talked about, even better, because that's exactly what this team needs. So shout out to those 2 for doing that. And it ended up being a really good game. Having Hufanga back out there with the club on his hand, he was flying around on the field making plays. It was really good production from the whole team. It was a team win, and it was the first one since week 1. So now you're going to this Rams week where the Rams are fighting for the division as well, just like the other 2 teams. And the Rams are coming off of a massive win against the Buffalo Bills, who we just got dominated by in a snow game. All right, slow your horses, everybody. That was a snow game. My quarterback can't throw a football in the snow game. We already talked about that. But it's watching what the Rams did last week to Buffalo is terrifying. However, it's terrifying from an offensive perspective, or rather defensive, looking at it from a Niners perspective. That Rams team went and put up points on that Bills defense like it was nothing. But they also couldn't stop anything. Like Josh Allen had, I think it was 6 touchdowns, 3 of them through the air and 3 of them on the ground or something crazy. Like,
yeah, he had 6.
first
3
player in NFL history, right? It's insane what he did, but he still couldn't get the win because that high powered offense that you and I talked about in the preseason showed its face finally.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm a little bit worried about going into this one. So if the Niners lose this game, going in, we have a 5% chance to win the division. Let's go Niners. If they lose this game, the hopes for the season and doing anything, making the playoffs is essentially shot. I think it's actually impossible at that point, barring some other, obviously divisional games and how those play out. But this is a weird scenario for me because I'm asking myself internally, do I want them to win or do I not want them to win?
Yes.
And we kind of talked about that, off the air, because there's one side where you can totally sit everybody down after this week and just prep for next year, get the retooling underway and kind of get things going. And we can kind of talk about some of the retooling that already happened here in a few minutes, but you can do that. However, if the Niners win this game and, the other teams lose, well, shoot, your percentage, your 5% chance just gets a little bit higher. So it's interesting. I'm really conflicted. I want to see a Niners win ultimately, I think, because it's been such a frustrating year and it's been so hard for me to watch this team just go through this, I want to call it ebbs and flows, but just negative everything.
Yeah.
It's just been an awful season. So from a vibes perspective, as a fan, I want to see a win, but I get it from the other side where you get a loss, your chances are then shot. Let's see what the youngsters got.
So when we talk about this game, okay, so yeah, because you brought up that point, like what's more important to you? And then this is a prime time spot. Like you're getting the Thursday night game. The attention's going to be on the Niners. A win against the Rams team, who's everyone thinks has a better chance than you do. Like this is a nice wake up call and say, hey, we still have the potential that everyone thought. We were just going through it. And your offense had success against this defense earlier this year. It just came down to a few plays. So what? I don't want to ask you which way you're more leaning because you just gave a nice breakdown. But what is preventing you from saying, do you think it would be easier to rebuild with a lower draft pick this year? But at the same time, like think about it. If you're 9-8, you're getting a mid, at worst 18th, 19th. So do you think the difference between that versus, let's say you just lose the rest of these games and that's at least a 10 to 11 pick, do you think that's the difference between finding that stud player that you're hoping for in the draft potentially?
Personally, no, because the Niners historically have not drafted well early in the draft anyway, even in recent history. And when I look at the way that this Niners team has been built, a lot of them are the late rounds, the late round draft picks. And look at the guy last week who carried this team offensively in Brock Purdy and guys in Brock Purdy and George Kittle. Both of those guys weren't taken in the first round, second round. So I'm not super concerned about that, but I look at the injury that Dre Greenlaw had in the Super Bowl, and that was the last game of the season, win or lose, and he's out for what was looking like a year. Now, real quick, he's questionable going into this game. He's questionable. He might be back. Which I'm hyped about, but I'm also like, are we rushing him back? Right.
That too.
So it's weird, but I'm not super concerned with getting a high draft pick. And then on the other side of it, if the 49ers are locked in on somebody like the stud out of Boise State,
that'd be nasty.
I could totally see them trading up because there are tradable contracts on this team and there are guys on this team that are sought after around the league. And so from that perspective, you can stack picks and then you can trade up and you can move up to get to the position that you anticipate being able to pick your guy at. And they've done that before. That's another historical thing with the Niners in the draft. They traded up to go get Trey Lance, which, look, I was hyped about it at first. Like, I was like, yeah, I think he'll be really good. And that didn't work out. So hopefully this year, if they do have their eyes set on the draft, they know exactly who they're going to get and they know exactly what they're going to get out of that guy.
Right, and that'll make it a lot easier if they already believe that Brock Purdy is the guy and they pay him
100%.
as so, and then they're like, okay, now we can figure out the direction here. So with that direction, they did make a couple of moves. They did make a notable move. Do you want to talk about that real quick in terms of potentially setting them up for next year?
Yeah, so the 49ers restructured the contract of Javon Hargrave for 2025 and 2026. And this looks like it's kind of a setup to allow for a post June 1st release next year. The 49ers reduced Hargrave's base salary from 19.9 million to 2.1, dropping Hargrave's salary cap number to from 28.1 to 10.3.
Yeah, see, that's huge.
It is huge, and it completely opens up possibilities for next year, and it's it's opened up some different scenarios to potentially play out. So the retooling that we kind of talked about last week is kind of already taking shape. And the 49ers are already looking at the next seasons, as many teams in the league do and are. But to me, that shows that they are well aware of where they're at, what needs to be done, and they have kind of a plan going into next year, which is something that I need to see from this team, if they want any chance in competing, in the next year.
That'll be huge. And I am also curious, in other news surrounding this team, how are you feeling? Because I wasn't the only one that had to deal with some receiver news this week, and even more fun, you chimed in on it via the Behind the Back podcast Twitter, the X account, for those who want to check it out. So do you want to talk about what's happening with your receiver on your end real quick?
Yeah, so Deebo was asked at one point why he seems like he's washed, why he's been slow, and his response via X was not struggling at all, just not getting the ball, with the emoji with his hands in the air. And I mean, look, I get it, but at the same time, and this is what I tweeted out, per Next Gen Stats.
Mm-hmm.
Deebo ranks 57th in the NFL in separation. To put that in perspective, A.J. Brown, over on the Eagles, is third in separation. Brandon Ayuk, who's sitting and recovering, 9th. Jawan Jennings, who's wide receiver number 3, looking like wide receiver number 1 this year, is 19th in separation. So the issue for me is Deebo's talking about not getting the ball, but you're also not separating. You're not getting that separation that you've been good at least better at throughout your career versus this year. And look, maybe it's that schematic call, play calling. And maybe I talked about potentially Kyle Shanahan needing to have a second offensive mind come in here to this Niners organization to give him just a fresh perspective and a fresh set of eyes on this offense in terms of, running these wide receiver plays. But it's alarming from that regard. If you're a wide receiver and you're talking about not getting the ball, but you're one of the worst in the league at your position in terms of separation, it's like, do you see the issue, or am I missing something? It raises questions. So it was funny, and ultimately the Niners talked about it, similar to what happened in the Eagles organization. They had internal discussions, and then Kyle Shanahan came out. He's like, it's water under the bridge. Deebo was like, it's not me calling out anybody. I'm not calling out the quarterback. I'm not calling out the coach. I'm just calling it how it is. He's not getting the ball, and he's not wrong. But there's underlying factors, and that's the part that frustrates. But
okay, so then do you think he responds with a huge game this week? Do you think, just like the Eagles, do you think they tailor a little bit more and try to give Deebo the ball a little more?
They talked to Deebo about this earlier. I believe it was today, actually. They asked him, about, do you recall your game against the Rams? It was a Thursday night football game against the Rams when he essentially turned into that wide back. He had turned into that running back wide receiver and popped off, had an incredible game. And he recalled it. He talked about it and broke it down. And George Kittle was also asked, do you anticipate a big game from Deebo based off all the situation, everything that's unfolded this week? And George said, he was like, I absolutely do. I think Deebo is the kind of guy who will step up when something like this happens, and when he's, on the radar like this. This is something that he answers, and he does in a lot of ways. He backs up his talk. Look what he did to the Eagles last year. I hate to bring it up, but
No, it's true.
he crapped on you guys after waiting all year long for that game and all this talk that was like, are you going to back it up? Are you going to back it up? Well, he backed it up. And that's something that I anticipate for this week. If you are Deebo Samuel, if you are who you have been and want to continue to be, then absolutely you need to come out and back up what you were talking about all week long and all year long. And this is the week to do it.
I think that if you're a smart bettor, you're picking the over on Deebo and picking the over on AJ. Both their stats, considering all the drama that's been coming out this week. So besides Deebo, what else do you think? Especially it's a Thursday night game. It's going to be a little bit tougher. You given the Niners' history, you just worry about some of these things. It's always going to be clunky. But what do you think needs to be done? What are you looking for in this game for the Niners to really pull out a win and keep your hopes alive?
So let me start with the injury report. On the 49ers end of things, questionables going into this game are Nick Bosa, Khalil Davis, Dre Greenlaw, and Isaac Guerendo. Now, Marcos, what's alarming about Isaac Guerendo being questionable?
Do you have any other running backs?
We actually do. We have at least one more, but that is going to be our fourth string running back, a man by the name of Patrick Taylor Jr. He's in his fourth year in the league. He had 3 years, his first 3 years with the Green Bay Packers. And he's a good running back. But the thing I'm looking for in this game is I need to see some air domination, because the simple matter is you don't have your running back 1, 2, or 3. And when that's the case, you're leaning on somebody who has little to no reps at that position. When you get to your fourth string at any position, you have little to no reps, at least in a game sense. And this is the kind of scenario where you have to lean on your stars, specifically your quarterback, specifically your Deebo Samuels, your George Kittles. George has not been targeted nearly as much as he should be as one of the best pass catching tight ends in the league. Like, he's gone over 1,000 yards in multiple seasons, and this year his targets are way down. And the simple part is, well, our offensive line has been banged up, and so he's essentially had to be an offensive lineman. I totally get that. I respect that. Keep my quarterback safe. But on the other side of things, I absolutely want to see like some play actions that get Purdy on, using his legs and moving out to the sides, because he's absolutely a mobile quarterback. He has proved that he's capable of doing it. Get him outside of the pocket and let him make those plays. He's capable of doing it. So I need to see a good coached game from Kyle Shanahan. That's my number one key. My second key going into this is you have to make Matt Stafford feel that D-line. Mm-hmm. Simple. It's really simple. If Matt Stafford doesn't feel pressure, he is elite.
Yeah.
And I don't want to play an elite Matt Stafford. I've played an elite Matt Stafford, and it's not fun. He pops off. He has great games. He is a great quarterback. But if you make him feel uncomfortable and you make him force things, he makes mistakes. And that's something that the Niners have to focus on in this week. Last key, obviously, you need to have that big Kittle game again. You need to lean on him. Like I said, it's massive that you get Kittle going. Utilize Deebo and his amped upness in this week.
Yep.
Use these guys. Use the energy that they are, just letting out right now. Like, you have to just lean on that as best you can, because this team, for the first time all season, is playing with their backs against the wall finally, even though their backs should have been against the wall since week 2. And that's the part for me that's frustrating. But if this is the week you want to do it, go out and prove that you absolutely have something to play for, because 5% chance, it's a 5% chance. There's a chance.
There is a
go
chance.
Out and do it.
I mean, the Hawks have shown that they have been able to go on win streaks and losing streaks. So, I mean, if you just take care of business, the opportunity sits. And all you guys get one more chance against each of your division opponents, right? So you're 1-1 against Seattle. This is your second chance against the Rams, and then you have one more against Arizona, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, this, like, if you guys just take care of business, the opportunity lines itself up. Their opportunity is there. So
yeah.
You can't count them out yet, dude. It's not over till the fat lady sings. So, the Niners are very much in this. So What is your score for this game tomorrow?
Look, you're not gonna tell me that I can't have audacious takes no matter how crappy my team is playing. You're not. You're never gonna tell me I can't. So I've got the 49ers putting up 35 points. Simply 35 points. And that defense is gonna step up. I think we're gonna get Dre Greenlaw back. Whether it's too early or not, I think we're gonna get him back. And I think that defense is absolutely gonna ride that momentum of having that guy back because he is the energy of that defense in a lot of ways, alongside Fred Warner and Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa is also probably not going to play. I would be surprised if he plays. But look, having Dre back is going to do massive things. And I think that they're going to hold the Rams to around 24 points, 27 points. So I'll give them the high. I'll go it's 35-27 Niners.
Keep the Brock Purdy heater going, 35-27, huh? So I would say, listen, if the offense shines, the offense plays how it does last week, big Kittle game, maybe Deebo gets involved, Jawan gets involved because Jawan cooked them last time. This offense has every right to pop off. So hopefully everybody stays healthy from, I don't know what happens if Patrick Taylor goes down. Then, that's a whole nother conversation. So it's one of those things that it's going to be a huge Brock Purdy game. It needs to be a huge Brock Purdy game, and the rest of the season will fall on his shoulders, and this is his time to earn that money. So this is good. Mm-hmm. This is good. This is a huge moment. You guys get the solo game, the spotlight game. I would say 31-27. It's going to be close. It's a divisional game. It's going to be nasty, but it's going to be a fun one tomorrow. I'm excited for it.
Love it.
All right, so we will push on to our Chargers check-in. Now, listen, guys. The Chiefs might just be the luckiest team on the world. I don't know which other way to describe it. They doinked in a field goal to win the game in a game that both teams, it was an ugly game. It really wasn't that great of a game, if I'm being honest with you. The Chargers have been making a habit recently of winning ugly, but that's what happens when their opponents get a little tougher. Herbert went down again in this game multiple times. One was an ankle, and then one was a lower leg contusion is what they were called. And when we saw that, we're like, oh man, this might be it. Like there goes our playoff take. But apparently there have been reports that he is planning on playing this week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which again is a huge spot for both teams. But, they run that risk. So how are you feeling about the Chargers going into this game against the Bucs?
I'm definitely worried because I'm worried about Herbs. That's kind of where I'm sitting. But I have found a lot of faith in that Chargers defense. And that's something that I think in this one, regardless of the condition of your quarterback, you're going to have to see a good defensive game from this Chargers unit again. And I think they're more than capable of doing that against the Buccaneers. Both teams have got their seasons on the line and for different reasons, but ultimately the same goal. And to try and stay where each team is at, you have to win this game. And so these are the kind of games that get players who are questionable playing. And these are the kind of games that elevate players who want it just a little bit more. And this is something I'm going to be looking for in this Chargers team is who's going to kind of step up and be that, leader, that field leader for this team, who's going to go out and make the big plays to try and get the win.
Yeah, and especially against the, when we saw last week against the Chiefs, they had Mac and Bosa back. Like they have their defenses fully back and ready to go, and they were flying around the field. So against Mike Evans and Baker, they're going to get the opportunity to turn the ball over. He turned the ball over twice last week. It's going to be there. Baker's going to make some cool throws, but he's also going to give you opportunities to capitalize. So I praise Herbert for playing through injury, but it's definitely when, he is the franchise guy, when you've paid him all that money, it's definitely something to worry about. But if he goes out there, then we can critique him on how he does when he's out there, and hopefully he stays healthy. That's all that matters. But, we'll see if he has Ladd McConkey in this game. Ladd missed last game too. You could definitely feel that difference, even though those guys stepped up. So, for those guys who have to step up again, if he's gone, let's see if they can do it. The Bucs defense is, liable to give up some points too. I know Todd Bowles is an awesome coordinator, and the defense flies around, but I think they'll have a good chance in this game. And if they win this game, they're in a very good position to make the playoff in the wild card. So for both teams, a lot's on the line. So I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, and I would be surprised if Ladd doesn't play. I know he's been limited at practice throughout this week, but I think the goal in the end for this, by Sunday is to have him playing, because you need Ladd out there. I mean, it's simple as that. You need Ladd out there as one of the top targets for Herbert to throw to, and especially just having that security blanket out there. Every
Yeah.
quarterback has it, and Ladd's been that in a lot of ways for Herbert throughout this year. So I would be surprised if Ladd doesn't play, but definitely something to keep an eye on. I've got we got the Chargers winning this one. I got
Oh,
faith in the boys, man. As far as the score is concerned, I think it's probably going to be around 28 points. I'll go 24. I'm going to say 24-17
I'll say 20.
Chargers.
I'll say 24-21 Chargers. I believe in that the Chargers defense can win this game for them, and put them in prime positions to keep Baker and them in check. It's going to be tough, but it's at home, so the Bucks have always been tough, when they play in Tampa, but on the road it's up to Baker, and that's where he can get a little antsy. So I think it's one of those
Yeah.
things that if they let Baker just try and sling it and try to beat them, they have the opportunity to win. So yeah, 24-21 Chargers on my end. So let's talk about our betting picks of the week. Last week we kind of did try to convince the other guy on your pick, and then we rode with the picks that we thought were better. So let's try that again this week. I thought it was a lot of fun. So you kicked it off last week, so I will kick it off this week. And when you look at some of these lines, dude, there's some easy ones in here that I can try to convince you of. I'm going to try a game that won't be that watched, but I think it's a good line. Carolina Panthers, 2.5-point favorites at home against the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys found another miraculous way to lose on Monday night. They're devastated. Micah Parsons is just like broken.
Crying.
Yeah, exactly. Literally. So they don't really have anything to play for now. And I think at this point, mathematically, they are somehow still in it, but at the same time, I just don't buy it. And Carolina has been frisky and knocking on the door against top level teams. And I just think this is the game where Bryce Young has a great game and they showcase, okay, the Panthers can win a game finally. And I think they'll get the opportunity to win a game against Dallas, who's reeling, and it's on the road too.
I like that. Then in that case, I'm going to take the my side of things is the Niners are favored 2.5 against the Rams. It's the same line, but two entirely different games. So in my eyes, the Niners and Rams is a divisional game. Things get hairy, but ultimately, do you trust? What it comes down to is, what team do you trust winning more? Do you trust the Niners beating the Rams, or do you trust Carolina beating the Cowboys more?
When it comes down to it, I do trust. Honestly, I do trust the Niners beating the Rams more. I think
Yeah.
both Carolina and the Dallas is a toss up, but I respect you buying into your team. We did this last week with the Eagles, even though the line was ginormous and ultimately let us down. But when it's a game like this, divisional game at home, 2.5-point favorites, just need a field goal to cover. I buy it. I think the Niners will cover against the Rams. So let's go with that for our first pick.
Love it. All right. Baltimore Ravens are 14.5 favorites against the Giants.
Yikes.
Marcos, that's a massive line.
Yep.
That's a lot of points. So I'm going to take that one as I think the Giants cover, because that's a lot. I don't think they're going to win, but a 10-point game.
Yeah.
That's where I'll put it.
Listen, the Ravens are coming off of a bye. Lamar is disappointed after the loss that they suffered against Philly. He really wants to get back out there. He's going to try and give it his all. But at the same time, 14.5 is huge on the road, whose defense is struggling. This could be a game where Drew Lock just kind of actually, makes a couple good plays, and Malik Neighbors can, get open and maybe, make this game semi-interesting. They'll stay within a puncher's chance. But I agree with you wholeheartedly that the spread's just a little too much to buy into. We've noticed this trend kind of happening this year where the largest spread of the weekend never really covers. So it's one of those, or never really, the team who's favored by the most never really covers. So I think this is a good bet to make. So I'm going to roll with that with you too. I think I don't think there's a game that would make more sense in terms of swaying me the other direction.
Fair enough. All right, what's your last one?
this is tough because there's a couple good games on here, and a couple of my teams on here that I'm looking at. But I like this matchup. I think Denver Broncos 4-point favorites at home against the Indianapolis Colts. I think the Broncos defensively are just going to be able to stifle the Colts. The Colts still have a shot in the division. They're not out, but unless Houston really collapses, Indy isn't really going to be able to have a real chance. But Indy has something to play for, but this Denver team, they're trying to keep up with the Chargers and the Chiefs and hang in the wild card. They are right there. They are the team that can make the difference between one team losing their spot and another. So I think Denver and Bo, they're going to come out here against the Colts defense that's not that great, and they'll win by at least a touchdown.
Love it. No, that's the one that I had circled too, because
Love that.
it's going to be a really good matchup. I agree with you. I think we should take that one.
No, that's good. Okay, cool. So those are our betting picks of the week. Please feel free to go ahead and spend your money on it. We can't just yet, but hey, help us get big, and we can go ahead and put some money down on those. So we are going to be right back. We switched up our structure this week, so now we are going to be talking Kings after a very, very juicy football conversation. I'm glad we got to address some of these issues, and I'm very interested to see what happens in these next few weeks, let alone this week. This week is going to tell us a lot about our team, so I'm looking forward to our conversation next week on football. But we're going to be right back. We are going to talk some Kings. All right, we are back to talk some Sacramento Kings. So as you look down there on our win tracker, they've won a couple more games, and now we're starting to see the fruits of the Kings' labor for trusting Malik Monk in the starting lineup. So Ben, we've won 3 games now. We're 3-2 with Malik as a starter, so now we have a 5-game sample. Still pretty small, but it's enough to kind of take some of this information and run with it. So what have we been seeing now that the Kings have started Malik Monk?
Consistency, Marcos. That's what we've been seeing.
Big word.
It's been awesome. I mean, that's something that we've been talking about. This team has been lacking, is that consistency. And to finally have a starting lineup that is set in stone, like you don't have to build this starting lineup anymore. It's done. It's done. Like you don't have to focus on that anymore. It's time to focus on the bench, in my opinion, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But Malik, since being a starter, I have some numbers to just throw at you real quick. He's averaging 19 points a game, 6.4 assists a game, 4 rebounds a game, on 47% field goals from the field, 42% from the 3, which is huge, 92 from free throw. So, and on top of that, the Kings are number 1 in the league in offensive rating since he's been starting. Like,
Yep.
this is the oversight that we as Kings fans, the Kings as an organization, Mike Brown as a coach, has been accustomed to so far with Malik Monk. Is why not just play your best 5 players in the starting lineup? We tried to make it like it makes sense. We were like, we tried to justify it. Yeah, it makes sense for him to come off the bench because he's a spark, and it does. But when you're not getting the kind of production that you need from a starting lineup, or at least that you need from this starting lineup, you have to change something up. And when your change up is a guy in Malik Monk who is just Mr. Consistent in a lot of ways, it's the perfect fit. So I've loved the fit personally.
Yeah, same. I think then they'd ask a few of the guys about it. De'Aaron and Domas have obviously been vocal about, they're like, it's kind of about time. We're really happy for him. He's earned this. And I also think like there was always that possibility once they paid him that this reality could have happened. And listen, I wish it would have come with more wins and us not needing to claw back. But we're in this spot, and with him, we have a better chance to start out games stronger and keep the momentum going. And listen, like Kevin Huerter taking over Malik's role as a 6th man, he's been playing really well as well. And he's starting to find his shooting stroke too. Listen, it's not him going to the bench that's causing Kevin Huerter's role to help out, but it's what Mike has chosen to do with his bench minutes. He's trying to play Kevin Huerter 12 straight minutes when he goes out there. So then Kevin can find a rhythm and not be afraid of getting pulled without really getting into, finding his rhythm. And I think it's important that Mike is making some of these adjustments. Listen, he's so up and down. You never really know. You never really know what Mike has planned. You never really know who he's wanting to play on any given
Hate him and
night.
love him.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he's aware that he's wacky. I think he's aware that he's unorthodox. So you got to give him credit for the things that work. And the Malik, he let Malik start, and he's letting Kevin get a good run off the bench. And I think this is helping. This is helping the lineup, kind of adjust to each other, because it's not like these guys haven't played with each other. It's not like these guys are, finding this isn't a new lineup that are playing with each other. So I think sometimes, a change in who starts and who comes in at what times, I think it just helps. And then when you get to rest De'Aaron right away, knowing you have Malik Monk is the same thing as bringing Malik Monk in right away. So I think it's working. Now it's just a matter of can these five gel together? Can these five stay healthy together long enough to really develop a consistency throughout the stretch run that we have to go through this year? Because listen, they just dropped 140 points in back-to-back games. Like, this isn't.
Yeah.
And listen, they were against the Utah Jazz, who has the worst record in the league, and the Spurs without Wemby. But like, that's not nothing. So I think it's important to recognize that this change is working, and it's just a matter of, can they continue this consistency, and how can they make this team better without sacrificing that continuity.
Yeah, and here's the thing, you beat the worst team in the Jazz and you beat the Spurs without Wemby, but you have to. And it would be a completely different story if this team had lost one or both of those games, because you're starting your best five players and you're still finding ways to lose to teams you shouldn't be losing to. So being able to take care of, teams that you should be taking care of is something that, we need to see more of with this team. I mean, I'm still not comfortable because we just, essentially glazed the starting lineup and these last, 2, 3, 5 games. But the thing is, we're really only putting Band-Aids over a massive cut that needs stitches. And this is kind of the problem with the Kings right now, is we find ourselves in a scenario where, yes, our starting lineup is set, but we're looking at the play-in from the outside. And yeah, it's a product of having started the season poorly and whatnot, yada yada. But the real thing is, even though you're winning, you still lack size, you still lack physicality. There are things this team is missing. And there's a great chance to get those things by or at the trade deadline. And this is something that I want to kind of open this discussion, because it's not too early. All right. It's not. And I'm sick of people thinking it's too early to start having these discussions, because right now we just heard rumors of two guys I'm going to talk about here in a minute with you. Two potential trade candidates that have floated around Sacramento here a few times in the past, and now this year. We heard that they're up on the block, they're taking offers, and teams who are interested are teams who are in our conference and right around us. You've got the Warriors interested in them. You've got the Timberwolves interested in them. You've got San Antonio. You've got New Orleans. Like, there's all these teams who are in a very similar boat as you who are interested in these guys. And the thing is, what I'm nervous about is Monty likes to be patient and stand pat in a lot of ways. This isn't the season to do that.
Right.
You can't do that. You have to beat these teams to the punch and go get these players if you want to be more competitive than the guys who are, looking at these same players. So this is a massive turning point, what could be a massive turning point in the season in a lot of ways, in positive and negative. And I want to talk to you about a couple of these trade candidates. Now, these are names floating around right now. And it's interesting that I see them, because I had kind of talked to you, about them a couple times off the air and on the air. I think on the air.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about these names before, nonetheless. But it's funny to see these names now officially coming up in the rumors. So the first guy I want to talk to you about is Cam Johnson from the Brooklyn Nets. Absolute baller, right? The other night having just a killer game. This season just having a great season. Well, they're up to listen to, to trade packages for him. And he's absolutely, I say absolutely, he's available. They're listening to calls. How do you feel about Cam?
I feel good about Cam. I think he would fit what we're looking for. Now, listen, he's 3-and-D, a little bit more on the 3 side of things, but listen, given the way this offense has been inconsistent this year, a guy like him coming off the bench, who's
Mm-hmm.
also kind of a plug and play, like if DeMar goes down or something like that, you can throw him right into the starting lineup and he adds a different level. He's improved every year that he's been in the league, and he's shown a consistent role. I think playing for Jordy has helped him a lot too. And I think that he would be such a good fit in the system. Now, financially, money wise, that's where it comes to, if you're getting a player like Cam, you do have to sacrifice a player like Kevin, a player like Trey. Trey's money doesn't make sense, but you're going to have to sacrifice that quality level, skill wise, of a player if you're trying to get Cam Johnson in return. And the question is, what do the Kings truly have to offer? Are they how deep into the picks bag are they going to try and go? And
Mm-hmm.
to try and avoid having to get rid of players to bring, would that make a difference? Would a Kevin Herter trade with someone else be enough for Cam Johnson, and would that do enough? And that's going to be the tough part in this trade deadline. But I like him as a piece. I think he would be really good here.
On that note, would it do enough? Would it be enough to land Cam Johnson is something we need to focus on. He's my number 3 option, even though I would actually take him probably number 1. But he's my number 3 option for the biggest reason being it's going to be a bidding war for Cam. It really is. It's going to come down to who has the best package to offer for him. And this is where you're going to offer the players, that you just mentioned, but then you're going to have to start adding picks and future picks and this and that to try and just juice up the deal a little bit more. And this is where you start gambling your future a little bit more by incorporating these picks and incorporating these certain players. It gets a little dicey when you have to get into a bidding war with some of these teams. And that's why I'm wondering if it's worth it when you've got other players. Number 2, being a guy in Dorian Finney-Smith, also on the Brooklyn Nets. He's similar to Cam, but the market might be a little bit less for DFS than it is for Cam. It just feels a little more realistic. I'm not sure if you have a similar idea on that or how you feel.
Yeah, no, for DFS, he's definitely someone you can get at a much cheaper premium. I think that what he offers is very important to an organization, especially one like the Kings. I think he's the kind of player that a lot of teams could use because he doesn't demand the ball. He's just going to stand in the corner and drain threes and defend the best player on the opposing team and do it well. And on our team, you can filter him in off the bench, have him play alongside Keegan, take the pressure off of Keegan from having to defend the best player, and maybe help Keegan incorporate his offense a little bit more during these stretches. And I think that Dorian provides a level of versatility. Imagine if you're throwing him and Jay Crowder in at the same time. Maybe offensively you're slightly limited, but you're never going to lose that physicality defensively. So it's one of those things where what it would take to get him would not be nearly as much, and maybe that comes in the price of like a Trey Lyles because of the money. That would make sense, but and you wouldn't have to sacrifice Kevin, so then you have the guard versatility still, and you still have Keon to rely on too. So then you get size on the bench, and you get a guy who can guard all 5 positions. It's hard not to want that when that level of versatility is what you're missing.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of where my head's at too. It's a player that you can switch 1 through 5. That is so sought after throughout the entire league, especially like when I look at this Kings team, something that they've struggled with, especially against the team in San Antonio, not the last matchup, but the matchup before in our house, where we were switching everything on every play until the last like minute of the game when we finally started getting stops because we stopped switching everything. But what it kind of opened my eyes to was this team likes to switch every chance that they get. This Kings team likes to switch. And so in my eyes, incorporating a guy in DFS who you can switch 1 through 5 and do multiple switches throughout a defensive possession, that's huge, man. To be able to have that switchability and to be able to hit a team with different looks defensively, I think was something that this Kings team could really benefit from.
No, I agree completely. DFS definitely makes, I think, of the options we're talking about, he makes the most sense in terms of you're going to be able to get him for cheap, and you won't have to sacrifice your system to add him into the mix. Because like Cam Johnson, he would fit offensively into this system, but to integrate him defensively would take some time. Um, but again, he provides versatility, but again, he's going to cost a lot more, and he's still young. And Dorian Finney-Smith is getting there in age, but he's still young enough to be valuable for this team. So I would definitely, if it had to be, I like Cam Johnson better as a player, but I think in terms of, if we, like you said, if we had to rank what it would take to get them and factor all those in, DFS would definitely be above.
Absolutely. So getting into my last player that I'm going to hit you with. This is a guy who last year especially we saw 6 different times. And 6 different times he was absolutely a factor in why this team dominated the Sacramento Kings. And this player is not a star. He's just a really, really good role player. And it's somebody that you can add into this team and pretty much immediately have an impact. Herb Jones from the New Orleans Pelicans. I like this one a lot. It's a realistic potential trade option. Teams have shown interest in him at times, but there's no rumor team being heavily pursuing him at this stage. And obviously we're still early, but what did I just talk about? It's early, you need to take action.
Mm-hmm.
So on that note, how do you feel with Herb Jones and adding him in here? What would it take?
What would it take would probably be more than any of the other two guys we talked about. Herb Jones is a player who he's that next level. When you talk about Dorian Finney-Smith, he's that juiced up. He is a 1 through 5 defender. He's twitchy, he's versatile. He shoots 40% from 3. That was last year. He's a little bit off this year, but he was coming back from injury. But what it would take to get him would be a lot more. We would definitely need to sacrifice picks. It would probably, because they did pay him, so it would probably require Kevin Huerter to match the money. But that part, when we're talking about Kevin for a guy like him, that's a trade that I'm more than willing to make in terms of, because of the versatility he has, his ability to spread. Again, you wouldn't be able to get that anywhere else, and especially if we don't have to give up a guy like Keon either. Then you can pair those two defensive studs, and not to mention, Herb is also the kind of guy who can start for you in a pinch, and then that'll be the decision that they kind of have to make, is maybe to get a guy like Herb Jones. It would seriously take someone who starts for us, and that might be the guy. The thing about it might end up being like a DeMar or something like that, but it also depends on the direction the Pelicans want to go, because the Pelicans, for a guy like Herb Jones, who will be, when the trade deadline comes around, if the Pelicans continue to deal with these injuries and suffer, he's going to be a guy to float around to turn this thing around. And they could realistically get 2 first-round picks for him, considering how some of these markets have gone. So I think out of all 3, he would be the hardest to get, but he's the hardest to get because he would have the biggest impact. And I think that's where he's my favorite player of the 3, but he would definitely be the hardest one to get.
Yeah, and he would, and it would take a lot. But the reason that I kind of view it as realistic, and one of the more realistic ones, is I get the sense of urgency from this Kings team based on everything I'm hearing. And we saw Herb Jones 6 times last year. We saw him do everything that he did to us 6 times. And when you see a player this many times, and you see a team this many times, you kind of dissect them, especially when they beat you as many times as they do. And you get this idea of, why did this team beat us? Why did this team beat us? And you see the switchability that the New Orleans Pelicans have. And this is something that, they're struggling right now with just stacking wins. They have injuries up and down. They have inconsistencies. There's all kinds of issues, right? They're in a weird slump right now too. And they're not necessarily in a rebuilding phase, but they're in a retooling phase. And a retooling phase means they're open to essentially anything. They're open to kind of seeing what is out there. And if you can build a package for Herb Jones, I think, I'm going to be honest with you, bro, I really think he puts us as a top 5 team in the West at that point, just based on
Agreed.
what he would bring to the team in an immediate impact.
I think if we're trying to make ourselves into a contender, that's the kind of player you need. I think if you think of a Mike Brown dream role player, that's the guy you bring in. So I think
Yeah.
Herb has done a great job terrorizing us on the defensive side of the ball, because like what we try to utilize Keegan, we do the same thing. You throw Herb Jones on a guard, he'll be able to stop him. You throw him against a lengthy big, he will be able to stop him. Yeah, he's not the strongest dude on the planet, but his you can't teach his length, you can't teach his wingspan. Like, he has those intangibles that other guys just don't have, and that's what makes him valuable. And that's something that we just don't have on this team. And having him on this team would definitely elevate us in a way that, especially when you don't have to sacrifice Fox or Malik or Domas or even Keegan to get Herb Jones, and you get to put all those guys on the floor together, that would work better than, in my opinion, what we have now for our starting five.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the 3 trade candidates I've got right now. Obviously, we're still a little bit of ways away from that trade deadline, but like I said a few times already, and I'm going to continue to say every single episode until the trade deadline's over, you can't afford to sit on this and play your cards, safe in a lot of ways, because you've played your cards safe and it hasn't worked, the last year. So in this offseason, you made a splash move and it hasn't necessarily panned out the way you wanted it to. You can't just sit on it. You can't sit on it and let it just go, because there is still some issues with this team. Just because you found 2 wins making over 140 points, yada, 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 we can get on the whole list. Doesn't matter. The same issues are still the same issues. You still have defensive liabilities. You still have a lack of size. You still have a lack of switchability. There's issues you need to address. And if you address these before the Golden State Warriors, before other teams around you can take advantage, you're going to set yourself up for a way better chance at a playoff run, not a play-in run, but a playoff run, if you can do this quick. So I'm curious to see how soon Monty really puts this into action.
I mean, listen, when we're talking, to back you up a little bit, when you're talking about, oh, we can't afford to wait, like the trade deadline ends in February, so we're in December now. It's not that far away, as it's not like
Truth.
we're 25 games into the season now, so it's like we are entering legitimate trade time, and it is time to start taking some of these conversations seriously. And if you're the first team to put a bid on someone, it makes it, you can kind of set the market a little bit, because if someone comes in who's prepared and says, "Hey, we have 2 first-round picks ready to go. They're good picks. Like, let's knock them out. Let's get this plus another one of our guys and let's run with it," right? You're seeing guys being traded for 4 first-round picks. Like, things like that. You don't want to have to be the one to sacrifice 4 if you don't have to. You don't want to have to outbid someone just to get a player who you don't know for sure is going to pan out. So
Right.
I agree with you and wholeheartedly. Like, the sooner we make our interest known, the better. The sooner we try and put an offer down, the better. It will be a question of, Monty historically just doesn't do that, so it'll be very interesting to see if he does pull the trigger, because I think there is a sense of urgency where, like, you don't want, like we've talked about it, you don't want to waste the talent that you have on this roster, because on paper there is enough talent on this roster supposedly to get to where you want to go. So definitely something we need to look out for.
So real quick, before we wrap up the Kings combo here, want to highlight one last big thing. And that's not a team building thing, but it's a 10-game stretch. Now, before the season started, we broke down the schedule. I'm not asking you guys to go back and listen to that, but if you did listen to it, you understand how crucial the month of December and January is. And for the biggest reason being the amount of home games you play. And I want to focus on not just those 2 months. I'm going to back it up a little bit, and I'm going to take it by 10 games. The next 10 games, you play 8 games at home. It is so important that you take the rest that you just had. And I call it rest. You take the building time that you just had, because they're calling this a mini training camp this week with this like 3-day break that they've had. And then you play this game on Thursday in NOLA, and then you don't play again until I think Monday. It's either Sunday or Monday. I don't have it off the top of my head. Mm-hmm. It's Monday. So you pretty much have like a week off with just a game in there. It's crucial that you come out of that mini training camp ready to rock your building. You have to take care of home court advantage. And this is key. I mean, we were hoping that they would have, a rhythm going into going into this homestand. They kind of do.
Yeah.
At the same time, they don't, but they kind of do. They found something that they can really ride off of these last 5 games. You started Malik Monk with enough time to really get that developed before you have this massive homestand. So a way you can turn your season around starts with this next 10 games. Take care of the home court. Pick up one on the road. That way, if you do drop one at home, you're still even on it. Win the next 8 games at home. That's going to completely flip your season. That's going to completely flip the standings. And you're going to be looking at this Kings team at a completely different eye. And that's my key going into this stretch it's so simple. Just take care of home court.
Just win. That's literally, we've been in too many games this year where, just like last year, we could have won and we just didn't pull it out. But this is the time to change that, outlook on some of these games. And I think that things get way more questionable if we come out of this 10-game stretch 5-5, still hovering at 500, and then you go into the toughest stretch of the year going into the new year and it's not looking pretty. The matchups are hard. You go into games where we're playing 6 games in 10 days and it's hard. And that's where the whole season could fall apart. You need to revive what little, this is our best chance to catch up and set ourselves up to, at worst, get into a play-in run. We need to cement ourselves in that mix to keep ourselves competitive, because if we're hanging around, there's a chance. So that's all we got to do. But if we're hovering below 500, it's a tough world to get out of in the Western Conference this year, especially.
Yeah, exactly. So we got NOLA tomorrow, or rather today when this episode drops. We got NOLA at their house. You want to try and get that win. Obviously, the Pelicans are struggling at a similar rate that the Kings are, but you got to take advantage of that, and you got to try and get a win against them, because you dropped 6 straight against them. And if I see another loss to the Pelicans, bro, I might start ripping my hair out.
Seriously.
So got to get that win, and then the big ones after that, you play the Lakers, and I don't ever want to lose to the Lakers.
This version of them too.
You play the Nuggets before that, but that one's kind of, I call it a toss up, but the Nuggets are a damn good team, man. And regardless of the inconsistencies they've had throughout this season, they're always going to have Joker. And
he's cooking.
He's at an all-time level right now. So if you drop that game, I get it. But these 2 games against the Lakers, they've also regressed.
Oh my goodness.
They've fallen back to earth, and maybe below earth in a lot of ways. So there's just so many winnable games in here, man. And this is yes, you change your season by winning these games and by taking care of home court, but you also find the consistency again. Beat the teams you should be beating. And that's the biggest thing. Just by taking care of home court advantage and beating the teams you're supposed to, you're going to be so much better off.
Yeah, I think even if we drop, that's the thing, we're capable of exploding. So if we just consistently hover around 120 points a game offensively, I just don't see a way where we lose many of these games. So it's shots are falling now, and hopefully that rhythm can just continue to extend. And I think that's the reason they're doing a mini training camp, is so hey, you guys are in rhythm. We don't want to just stop it and then let you guys we could let you rest, but at the same time, you don't want to lose that rhythm that you're feeling. So you got to keep it going.
Yeah.
So, Malik and DeMar were resting today. They were trying to be careful with them because they had injuries pop up earlier, but I think they are good to go. They said if a game was supposed to be played today, they would have been good to go, but they're just monitoring them, which I think is a smart move. There's no need to overdo it when you still have so many important games left to go. But you're right. This is probably, when we look at it now, this is going to be the stretch where we're talking about, man, oh, this is the stretch they took care of everything. Now we're right in the mix. Or this is the stretch where they could have taken care of business, but they didn't, and now we're on the outside looking in, and I don't see a way back in. So this is it, dude. This could be the stretch run for us.
100%, and it might even completely change what kind of trade discussions Monty ends up having, and who he includes in a package based on how these next, 8 to 10 games go.
It's true. So we got a lot of fun stuff to look out for coming up here. But any final thoughts on the Kings before we head out here?
Just like I said, take care of home court. I'm hoping to get out to a game here in the next month, so
Nice.
hopefully I'll see y'all there. Other than that, though, I've really enjoyed the last 5 games, watching this team play, and regardless of the win or lose, but especially the wins, it's felt like a different team. It's felt like there's a different energy, and I'm hoping that they build off of that. So that's kind of my key going in.
Same. I think that's a great point. They just got to keep building, find what works for them, which it looks like they have. So hopefully they can ride that momentum to get a win streak going. That's not more than 2 games. Like give us a win
Please.
streak. Give us something. Like give us a nice run that helps us jump in the standings in a way that can help us be competitive during this important stretch that we're going to be going through once January hits.
Yes, sir.
All right, everybody. I think that's enough for today. With that being said, this was episode 69 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. Hit us up on any of our social medias that are located up above for all you audio listeners out there. The links to the descriptions are down below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, follow, review, comment. We love all the comments we've been receiving. We love that we're growing each and every week. We're almost at 100, guys. Like, listen, like we're going to celebrate these small victories now before, they don't become so small anymore, because we're in it for the long haul. So we really hope, the goal is to get to 100 and we can start building a legit community here, and we can get you guys involved on the pod. And things are changing. Life is changing, and that'll help us grow. And I think, we'll keep you guys in tune when we get closer to that. But we're really excited for what's to come here in what's going to be a few short months with how fast everything goes. So we're already talking playoffs for football. Like, they're right around the corner. We got 1 month left, and then things get crazy, and then we're talking about the NBA playoffs, and it's just all going to go by fast. So
It's crazy.
Starts this week. Hopefully the Eagles can shut down this nonsense with a win over Pittsburgh. Hopefully the Niners keep their season alive after when a win on Thursday against the Rams, and hopefully the Kings light that beam over the course of these next 10 games. We'll definitely talk about that. So I'm Marcos Conan Negron. Beside me here, as always, is
Benny the Jet.
All right, y'all. We love y'all. We will talk to you next week. Peace.
Peace.